All right. So good morning, everyone, and I welcome you to our webinar on bio-based materials and wood in construction and reconstruction of Ukraine. It's actually a really relevant topic because, as you know, Ukraine has to rebuild after the war in a better and more greener, more sustainable way. And there are many ways how to deal with it. Of course, you can reuse buildings, revitalize areas, and that is the priority. You also can reuse materials and recycle them, especially the debris and everything we have on the ground as a result of destruction. But still, we will not be able to get rid or like put to zero the demand for new resources, which means we have to be creative and use the potential of Ukraine in bio-based materials for construction. And uh, on the one hand, we've got an extreme potential. On the other hand, as I was told 2 days ago from one of the top architects in Ukraine when I was inviting her to this webinar, and she said, "Yes, but why are you organizing this kind of webinar? Because constructing public buildings, social infrastructure, and multi-story housing from wood in Ukraine is not allowed by law." And therefore, I said, "Well, that's exactly why we're doing it, because we have to change it." So I'm happy that we have today outstanding representatives of architectural world and especially timber construction from the Netherlands. Alex de Rijke from TU Delft, professor of timber architecture and studio DRMM from London. Thank you for being here. And we have Arjan Habraken from TU Eindhoven and SIDstudio. So researchers and practitioners who are going to speak today. First of all, I want to give the floor to no, but before Bram, I'm sorry. I have to warn Ukrainian participants about the translation because it's really important. Тож, якщо ви не розумієте англійську мову і вибачте, що це не зробив раніше, я хочу вас попередити про те, що у нас є переклад. Ви можете брати українську в планеті під екраном в секції переклад. Якщо ви розумієте англійську, то звичайно це краще лишатися на оригінальному каналі. Yes, now it's done, and I'm happy that we have Bram Remind from the Embassy of the Netherlands today with us, who is responsible for climate and energy in the embassy. And I'm thankful for the support of the embassy that enables to organize this kind of webinar. Bram, over to you for a short welcome word.
Thank you, Roman. And first of all, as the embassy and as the Netherlands altogether, we're very happy we can help with the good work you're doing. Then, good morning to you all. I'm glad I can be here. I'll just give a short introductory word. There is a saying, every ending is a new beginning. And I've been here in Ukraine since August, and the people I've talked to, this is exactly the way Ukrainian people look at it, or at least most of the people I've talked to. And not only the people, but also the Ukrainian government, because they try to look at the massive destruction caused by the Russian invasion in Ukraine. And then the question is, so after the war, what will Ukraine look like? How will we rebuild? And will it be the same or will it be different? And numerous local experts, international experts, the Ukrainian government, and the international community see the possibilities to rebuild Ukraine in a greener and more sustainable way. It is a giant task, and it contains many components because it is a very ambitious goal. But Ukraine does wish to build itself better, to build itself back better. And as the international community, well, speaking on behalf of the Netherlands, we are happy we can support you in that goal because it is a great goal. And an essential part of building back better is the rebuilding of the civil infrastructure. And that starts with the materials used for the reconstruction, not only rebuilding, new construction of new buildings,
I think, Bram, are you with us? We've lost you for a moment.
Am I back now, Roma?
Yes, yes, you are. Yes, thanks.
Okay, here we go again. So I was saying that an essential part of the rebuilding of of the building back better is the rebuilding of the civil infrastructure, and that starts with the materials used for the reconstruction. And if their production uses less CO2, if the materials used make sure that a building is more energy efficient, then that is already a way to build back better. Looking out the window now and seeing how, well, most of you live in Ukraine, so you know about the blackouts and about the importance of energy consumption and energy generation. The more energy efficient the building is, the better it is, not only for Ukraine now, but also in the future, and also when it becomes part of the EU, because the EU is very much concerned with the energy efficiency of the buildings. And building in such a way is difficult because we're not used to that, but bio-based materials can help us get there. Because bio-based materials not only have a lower carbon footprint, but they also offer advantages such as improved indoor air quality, biodegradability, and most importantly, enhanced thermal properties. They're more energy efficient when used in buildings. And that means also lower heating bills. Biodegradable materials or bio-based materials will revolutionize the way people design buildings, they construct buildings, and they operate buildings. There's maintenance, energy efficiency, building them. If you build from wood, that's an entirely different process than when you build from cement. The structural elements will be different. The interior will be different. It will be a different Ukraine when you use that. And of course, it's still the start. And even in the Netherlands, the Netherlands is one of the most, we're very innovative and advanced when it comes to bio-based materials, but still in the Netherlands, we're also at the start of using it. So there's a future that is still not super there, but we can get there, and that's why it's very important to start now on making yourself familiar with it, on getting to know what it would be like, what Ukraine would look like if we were to use bio-based materials to build Ukraine back better. And that's why I'm very happy to have two renowned Dutch experts with us who can share their knowledge and their insights on the subject. And I would like to thank all of you for being here and pass the floor to either one of them. I don't know which one starts. So
Yes,
up to you
yes.
guys.
We actually were hesitating before Alex joined, but I guess we have to start from Alex as he has to leave at 10, right? Am I right, Alex?
Thank you, Roman. Yes. And would you be able to run the presentation that I sent you?
Yes, that was my plan B in case you are not doing that. Let's see. Should be on the screen now,
Okay.
and I'll be carefully listening to switch the slides.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this event. I've always been an enthusiast for wood, and I guess that started in childhood. But it's very difficult to speak about timber without speaking about fire and disaster. And whilst, of course, it would be stupid to compare disasters, nothing can compare with what you are facing in Ukraine. I will start this little presentation which is not really academic so much as an example. This is one project which I hope will give you hope. It's a project that is about empowering the community after a disaster, and the means was collaborative effort and skill, and of course wood. So this image of the fire of London of 1666 was the moment when wood became regarded as a vulnerable material and even a fuel, rather than a means for creating a new city. So after this moment, there were 250 years of other materials. Now that's changed. Next, please. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. Okay, and the next. I'll just give you a little bit of the history of this town. It was established by Romans. The British eventually evicted the Romans. You could call it a kind of Roman exit. And immediately after the Romans left, we had a kind of dark ages. This all sounds very familiar right now, given UK's position relative to the EU. But it just shows that this particular spot is closer to Europe than it is even to London, which is about 87 kilometers away. Next. So this is a relatively small town of about 100,000 people. And you can see on the right the origins of the fishing town, and on the left, the new development, the 18th century and 19th century St. Leonard's. And the pier offers a kind of emblematic unification of those two towns with this mega structure of about 300 meters sticking into the sea towards Europe. Next. The pier started in 1887 as a pleasure structure. This is the function of piers, literally no other function than pleasure. And somewhere to enjoy the elements, being outside in the wind and surrounded by water and hopefully sunshine. The pier was extremely successful invention of an engineer who built in cast iron and hardwood. Next. This is the result of a development after a fire. And you can also see in the center of the pier a zone which was cut out in wartime Britain. During the Second World War, the population was convinced that the enemy would enter Britain using the pier as a landing stage. So they cut out the middle to prevent that, which I guess was successful, given that the invasion never happened. And you could say this was an example of an instinctive lack of infrastructure. Next. The pier was a very important place for the birth of popular culture. And a great many of Britain's best music acts played here. So it became a famous site of experiment for, well, social experiment, you could say, the beginnings of popular culture. Next. But by the 1990s, it had become overdeveloped, and in fact was not such a wonderful place. It was characterized by, you could say it was a shanty town of commercialism. Too little business, too little maintenance, and too little responsibility for the development of the piers. infrastructure. Next. At this moment, despite the fact that the pier was owned privately by tax exiles, the local community decided that the pier was their icon or their community structure. So they began to act as though they already owned it, and they were determined to acquire it. Next. A competition was launched to save the pier from its decay, and at the same time as the competition publication, the pier mysteriously burnt. This happened over a weekend, and the main building on the pier, which was a ballroom, was the site of the beginning of the fire. 2 young boys, 1 match, and the result was, next slide, complete devastation. Only the beginning part of the pier structure remained. Here you can see 1 of 2 buildings remaining and the pier decking intact. But the majority of the pier decking was obviously destroyed, along with quite a lot of the supporting structure in the water. So the brief for the competition had to change, and it had to be redefined from that of repairing to transformation and renewal for a different kind of future. And the next. The extent of the damage was surveyed, and for many, there was a need to replace and to build new, to start again. But there are also those amongst us, including DRMM, the designers, that the memory of the pier was also important, and that one could not erase history. It's futile to think that you can erase events from the consciousness of the local community. Next. So we carried out a survey of what the pier meant to people, and they gave us a great many answers, everything from a site of fishing to the site where they had been conceived by their parents. It was a pier that was very rich in local memories, even before the fire. Next. We drew up a master plan for phased renewal. So you can see the darker brown elements were to be built immediately or as soon as possible, as soon as the money was raised. And then the yellow elements were nice to have structures that could happen later. So number 1 is the renewal of the existing pavilion, the only building remaining on the pier. And number 2 is a new visitor center, which was an obligation of the funding. The National Lottery funding wanted to have a visitor center. For us, this was not so important. It's important to provide toilets and an exhibition space, but the idea of a museum was not important for us. We thought the whole structure was a museum of itself. So we designed a kind of lookout platform with the services inside it as an open air structure predominantly. Then nice to have would include things like number 2, the connection to the water so that it could be accessed by boat. And obviously nice things like number 6, a mobile canopy on rails, which could offer shelter at different parts of the pier for different events. The whole idea was that the pier would not become a collection of buildings, rather it would become a serviced platform where future buildings could be built and plugged in. Next. And this service platform had to be extremely strong. and take the weight of temporary structures like, say, a fair or 3,000 people at a music event or a temporary racetrack. You can see here, for example, the shadow, if you like, the footprint of a marquee which stood there for a while, soon after the deck was laid. So it's not so much a building as a well-serviced surface. Next. Most of the money was spent on the structure below deck. This included the renewal of the steel. Interestingly, the cast iron survived the fire much better than the steel, and particularly the post-war steel, which was of less quality. So the oldest parts of the pier remained. Next. Perhaps the greatest achievement of the project was, as architects, we were able to act as agents for change. So not just working as a technical design support, but really using our influence and ability to get publicity to help the local community gain ownership of the pier. And this was done through the local council, the city council, obliging the negligent owner who was absent and not responding to demands to make the pier structure safe. They were clearly simply waiting for insurance money, having probably caused the fire. So the local authority bought by compulsory purchase the pier and then sold it to the local charity in order that, I mean, very cheaply, they sold it for £1 because obviously the great burden of a pier is maintenance, which costs a great deal of money. Next. This is one of the engineer's drawings to locate and categorize every single pier and its condition below the, when I say every single pier, I mean every single column below the pier. Next. Here you'll see how our strategy for building the one new building was to create a cross-laminated timber box, so quite a rigid, simple structure, which would stand independently, not on the old pier structure, but on a new structure, which was inserted at exactly the point in the pier that had been destroyed during the war in order to stop the enemy. So we literally made a new bridge, if you like, to span from the old structure to the old structure across the void that had been created, firstly by the war and secondly by the fire when the inferior post-war steel melted. And this box structure is obviously engineered timber, and it had the advantage of strength and speed and the ability to be prefabricated to fine tolerances and be craned into position. Next. For this work, we had to engage the services of Dutch salvage experts, who were the only people with the expertise and equipment to carry out this work in quite volatile water. It's a tidal condition with many currents and a 5-meter tide height difference. Next. So, a steerwork replacement is very simply expressed and replicated, yet things like balustrading were uncompromisingly modern insertions into the Victorian style of balustrade, more of which in a moment. Next. Cross-laminated timber here comes from outside of Britain, which is obviously not as good as having your own timber. So I would encourage Ukraine to always use its own timber wherever possible. And if the manufacturing facilities don't yet exist for cross-laminated timber within Ukraine, then I would say that's more important to establish that than to import, say, German or Austrian cross-laminated timber panels when you already have such an abundance of excellent forestry and a long history of forestry, managed forestry. Here in the UK, we certainly miss, as a result of the war, we certainly miss the supply of Ukrainian timber. Anyway, this is Austrian timber, and was the extent to which we used external timber. If you go to the next, you can see that it was a simple CLT walls with glulam beams and organic lino floor, so that the interior was defined by the structure and natural materials, and the glass wall to the sea. The next. And this glass wall undulates in order to provide seating on the inside and on the outside, and to resist the wind load without needing any steel. Now you can see the cladding here, and there's a story behind that. The cladding is very much not industrialized, prefabricated, engineered timber. The cladding is the decking that we could retrieve from the burnt pier. So all of the wood that remained on the pier, we sorted into different categories, different lengths, and different structural conditions. So there were 3 types, 3 lengths and widths, and we used these in order to clad this building using local tradesmen, and also to create extensions for the pavilion, which I'll show in a moment, and also to create deck furniture and interior furniture. Next. And this wood is quite thin compared to the new deck of the pier. The new deck is eckie, and the old deck was purple heart and green heart timber from Africa, now very rare species. But at that time, 150 years ago, due to the colony infrastructure, this kind of wood was imported. And it's so hard and of such quality that even 150 years old, standing in these weather conditions and after a fire, this wood was easily good enough, I would say superb, to use as the cladding for the building. Next. The plans show how previously, at the top of the page, previously the building was a series of booths, of small compartments selling ice cream or drinks. And there was a desire for a bar. There was a desire for an open space to sit and see the sunset. And we therefore made the plan completely open. We rebuilt it using predominantly glass and wood. And the 2 circular additions are rucksacks that the building carries, which carries the services of kitchen and toilets. And these were made from the old pier decking. Next. So there's a combination of different types of wood detailing going on. For these curved surfaces, we obviously used the timber vertically and subdivided the planks in half in order to get the curvature and the detailing tight around those circular forms without needing to facet. Next. And when all the wood ran out or disappeared into the community, because there was a lot of theft, something that I'm sure is a familiar thing in post-war conditions. Local people do not have money in Hastings, and the temptation to have some of the pier as souvenirs or perhaps a garden deck was very high, so the contractor did have to put up with a lot of theft. Anyway, my joke is when the wood ran out, this is what had to happen. We had to, for events, we had to take recourse to inflatable wood. Next. The desire for historically correct reproduction on a listed structure, on a heritage structure, is strong when it's also a kind of memorial to a previous period. However, we were able to argue that that was then and now is now. And then it was a case of wrought iron being the most modern solution to balustrade design, and that now we could simply make a vertical cantilever of mild steel flats, and there would be no need for a primary and secondary structure of columns and balustrading. However, we simply adjusted the angle of the steel blades in order to provide this rhythm of shadow. Next. And this rhythm of shadow is based on the play of light and transparency as you walk along the pier, and also recalls the structural base of the original pier balustrade. Next. I think the success of the pier really is in that it does not give a signature building. It provides space, and sometimes space is more enjoyable than an object. I would say quite a lot of the time. Next. There's space for contemplation, there's space to shelter, and there's space to socialize, and there's space to program. Next. This, for example, is what I call space for contemplation, or to give it a name, regrets over Brexit. Next. The idea of no waste is particularly possible with timber because it's so easy to work. It's so easy to recycle, unlike other materials which need reprocessing, like, for example, steel or aluminium or plastic. But in the case of timber, it's absolutely possible to simply take given pieces of timber and then resize it, cut it to different proportions or lengths, and to use it in a very direct way. Here we enabled a local charity who are re-employing guys who've had problems with drinking or drugs locally and have been out of work, but have joined a local timber workshop in order to help. And I was able to simply sketch different designs for this furniture, and they took a great deal of pleasure and pride in making these furnitures for the pier using the wood that had survived the fire. And you can sit at these tables and you can even see the original graffiti or perhaps the names of people who perhaps fell in love there. Next. And the pier is a place for events. It's a place to either create community positive bonding or a place to try and generate revenue. Sometimes those two can go together. Next. Some simple details showing how we used the different lengths of timber in different ways. The top detail is the visitor center facade, and the bottom detail is the principle of vertical cladding that we used on the circular backpack buildings. And the detail bottom right just shows how we could embed glass to form a balustrade to get the maximum transparency on the Belvedere viewing platform. And inside the bench, we were able to have air handling within the timber structure, so that inside you just have a visitor center as an exhibition space, and all of the lighting and air handling is hidden within the timber structure. So an engineered timber box with a low-tech but high-quality timber cladding, recycled. Next. I think I've made that point. So this is really just to show how the idea of the reuse of local material containing local memories has even become the kind of branding of the pier, and the basis on which its popularity is known. Next. Well, I think the pier is a story about community strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Not the same kind of adversity that you face, of course, but nevertheless an example of the triumph of spirit and the local positivity. Really, it's all about making it happen because you believe it can happen. I think that's a good place to end. I think I would just say to conclude that in wood there is hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. I think I will stop sharing it for now, and I want to urge our participants to put their questions to Alex into the Q&A right now, because Alex has to leave quite shortly. So if you have any questions, it would be good to discuss them right now. You have like 10-15 minutes, right? Or
Sure. Yeah.
Well, obviously I'm quite amazed with this case, although you're right that this is not completely similar to Ukrainian situation, and the context is a bit different, but when you were presenting it, I completely I was somehow thinking of this new European Bauhaus, which is now gaining popularity in Europe among, first of all, policymakers, but then also architects and urban designers, because your project really entails so much, all those three components, which is environmental sustainability / circularity, inclusiveness and community engagement, and also aesthetics and culture. So we need this kind of projects in Ukraine too after the war to give to have hope, to have inspiration, and to be able to continue living. There are quite some questions already in the registration form, and I would start from those, and also would probably add some that appeared in my head during your speech, because first and foremost, it seems like this tragedy of 1666 in London is still not forgotten by Ukrainian authorities, and they are still very sensitive to allowing a wood construction which is higher than 3 stories. I know this is not related to pure case, but I'm just wondering because you have so much experience. How would you suggest or advise we can tackle this issue of making people more relaxed towards CLT construction and allowing that
Yeah.
for the reconstruction?
Yeah, it's a good question. The myth that timber is good in a fire is based on the way we burn it in our homes. It's just small pieces. So we've well, let me go even further back. The Industrial Revolution changed the status of timber from a construction material to fuel in order to make steel and iron. And at that moment, I think it became perceived in a different way. So the Fire of London was obviously earlier than that, but everybody knew the Fire of London was burning very small sections, and that all the roofs were thatch and reed, and the houses were kind of built of matchsticks. So wood construction continued with larger timber sections, and as anybody knows, you try and burn a tree, you put a tree trunk on a fire, it's just not going to burn. It's just going to protect itself. And this is the basis really of engineered timber's resistance to fire, that it has enough mass to be self-protecting and perform even better, structurally speaking, in a fire than, say, steel. And I'm sure you can see evidence of this all around you, where in a fire, the steel will suddenly melt at 500 Celsius, whereas the timber is slowly charring and still intact and quite predictable in its failure. So enough time to evacuate. And I think perhaps this position that you're in right now is also an opportunity to change regulations, change perceptions, with examples and with knowledge and data that you can get from your fellow Europeans. And so I would encourage you to lobby government and say, this doesn't make sense, and also to lobby insurance companies and finance houses. These often also influence timber construction. I'll give you an example. I did the first cross-laminated project in the UK, which was a sports hall for a school in 2006. And the local authority were persuaded that the cross-laminated timber panels could resist the fire long enough and that it was a safe building. And the fire brigade were happy with the building. And in fact, the chief fire officer said he was happier to go into this building than to go into a steel or concrete building. And the difficulty we had was just with the insurance company. And I've seen that pattern a lot, in the last 25 years. So it's a good moment to affect change. You have this perhaps period, I don't want to make any predictions about how long this terrible situation will continue or not, but it is a time in which you can affect change, where people are more likely to see reality and more likely to see the advantages of sensible thinking. So go for it, try and lobby and legislate for building regulations to get up to date and really understand performance of timber in fire.
Thank you so much. I hope this event will contribute to that, and we really need some inspiration cases and arguments to do that. So you're helping us actually. You said a very interesting phrase during the presentation when you were showing the design elements in the pier and talking about rebuilding as it was, and about the heritage. So you said that then was then and now is now, meaning that, okay, we have to give all the respect and tribute to what was in there, but we can rebuild in a slightly different form and aesthetics. In Ukraine, this is quite, it's always a battle. It's always a battle and challenge between construction companies slash commercial entities, and the community and urbanists, who, well, one group is always willing to use the location at its most and have the most square meters and the most out of it in terms of commercial attractiveness, whereas the second group is always willing to preserve the heritage and to keep it as it was, and to just maybe kind of renovate it in a way. Even we had this very famous case with the theater on Podil, which was completely rebuilt by Oleg Drozdov, but it was not in the 19th century style. It was quite modern, and we still had a lot of criticism in the society. It doesn't look like that epoch, but it looks like 21st century. But in this case, I would also use. I mean, I would support Oleg, and I would say yes, then was then, now is now. But where do you think is the boundary between then is then, now is now, and the super abusage of the space? Obviously, it's not about your case, not by far, but in Ukraine and Kyiv, we have a lot of examples of basically abusing area, spaces and objects for commercial use that looks ugly, it's not inclusive, etc., etc.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is technology, you know. But what was the question? The question was, where's the line between recreating history and unashamedly modern response to a new situation? And I happen to have grown up in a town in Britain which was bombed completely flat, Plymouth, and in the southwest, and it's a naval town, and they were obviously targeted. And the post-war reconstruction was a kind of disaster, really, that was worse than the Blitz, because a master plan was created that was compromised entirely by the technology available at that time, and also the lack of empathy that the master planner had for the city itself. You know, and such was the desire to renew that it became anesthetized through the reconstruction, or modern. You know, but it was a kind of amateur modernism. So if you make a parallel, say, with Rotterdam, similar kind of port and post-war reconstruction, Rotterdam is much more interesting in its variety and not deference to history. It's unashamedly contemporary, but it acknowledges what was there in a way that Plymouth does not, you know. So whilst I still side with the contemporary response to make long-term sustainable, flexible buildings rather than reproducing, making a facsimile of what was, you know, the Dresden example. Whilst I still prefer the modern response, I would say it really has to be done in a way that avoids a single vision that gets master planned, because master plans usually fail, I think, because they don't anticipate change. It doesn't factor in time itself. So I guess when I say technology is the short answer, I'm also saying that you can't really expect to reproduce old buildings and not use new techniques. And therefore the lie is revealed, right? Because nobody's going to actually build in solid stone anymore. There is always going to be irresistible efficiencies offered by contemporary technology. So once you accept that that will happen, why are you trying to replicate history? You know, I think we need to express our age. We need to do what is right now. And I think, anyway, for me, right now is to make simple, flexible buildings which can change, can be recycled, as low carbon as possible. And that generally means either reused material or bio-based material.
Yes, definitely. And then the final very short question from our participant. What is an alternative to cement in insulated concrete plate foundation for a single family timber house?
Well, I would say, you know, cement isn't really necessary, and one doesn't need to replace it with an equivalent. One just has to build in a different way. I mean, yes, you shouldn't put timber in the ground unless it's completely below ground. And we have, therefore, concrete foundations a lot of the time. But I would still say that there are ways to build without any cement at all, including with foundations. You know, why aren't we using recycled plastic for foundations? Why aren't we using timber foundations underground and then a short section of, say, recycled plastic or recycled steel to go from underground to above ground, and then above ground use timber? But I guess if you want to use a wet trade and the advantages it has for casting, then I would say use hemp. You know, use hempcrete, which is an excellent insulation, a wonderful material, and works very well with timber construction. So for a single family timber framed house, hempcrete is a superb addition to that palette.
Exactly, and we have it in Ukraine. It's a very well, vibrant industry right now. Thank you very much, Alex, for your time and willingness to connect today. And thank you for this inspiring story. Well, we're gonna let you go if you need to for the meeting, and we will continue now with the second speaker of today, who is Arjan Habraken from the TU Eindhoven and SIDstudio. Arjan, the screen is yours, please.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. A very inspiring talk. I will have my story a little bit more technical. I'll share my screen first. I hope it works. Do you see the screen now correctly?
No, I cannot see it.
You don't,
have you pressed the share screen underneath?
Yeah. Oh, here beneath, I need to do this.
Now it's there and not full screen, but I can.
Yeah. Okay, but it's there then. If I just press this, then.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
You see it now? Okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, my name is Arjan Habraken. You see three companies actually at the bottom. I'll talk a little bit about what they are doing and how I'm involved. The question, it's really inspiring question, how to rebuild Ukraine. My talk is not thinking about that we know all the answers. I think what my goal here is to tell you what we're doing here in the Netherlands, and hopefully inspires people and gives some information or some innovative thoughts to further develop. And we're always, of course, very willing to help there. These three companies I'm involved in, and first I'm part-time professor at the University in Eindhoven. The second, the SIDstudio, is my own company, advising on all the structural parts. And the last one, MDLX, which is also very important for this lecture or for this talk. It's a company that I set up with several people where we're doing modular building system. And in name, it's not wood, but we build now mainly with wood. So we design, we produce, and build these structures. And in that sense, we have a lot of experience actually of all the items that are positive but also negative about modular buildings. And that's what I want to talk about. Because these three companies, actually, I use them, all the three of them, to combine the information about research, about real projects, about building, design, producing. All that information that actually is needed towards a better level of creating towards modular bio-based building systems. So for me, it's sometimes difficult to combine things, but it's also really needed to make right decisions that you think be outside of your own boundaries, actually, to look at that one, to be able to make the right choice within your own expertise. And that is really, when you're looking at modular building system, a very, very important thing to know, that it's not about your own discipline. It's really about combining all the disciplines. Otherwise, you will just have bits and pieces of buildings that you have to somehow connect on site, which is by far too late if you're working on modular building systems. So, and one of the drivers, because I'm going to talk about drivers about modular building system, one of them in the Netherlands is the affordable houses needed. We have a huge amount of houses that are needed, although the Netherlands is already very, very busy. Still, a lot of houses needed to get everybody a proper place. But the situation is that, many construction companies actually stopped building, especially also for these small houses. There are not many people, we have a lack of amount of people that can do the job. The material costs exploded, the construction costs are very high, and they make a lot of low profit on housing. And also the government and the restrictions on how to build it is still blocking actually real activity, especially, of course, the way of going into sustainable homes, which is very important, but also on the other hand, it will slow down some process, but still it's very important to keep that on a high level. But they're all in the same field trying to create those houses, but make it sometimes more difficult at the moment. Green needs to be rebuilt, of course, that's clear. But although green is, of course, a very, very complete different situation, and in no sense comparable, I really hope with this talk to explain what we're doing in the Netherlands, and then also explain, trying to give some sense on how things could be looked at. And what Alex already explained a little bit about the wood, yes, not having the regulation of not allowing wood there. Well, I agree completely. There is no stopping it. I don't think you're capable of getting the whole thing rebuilt when material wood is not a possibility. It will be a very difficult one. So the lessons that we learned, I hope that will will help also in that sense, so that we can have the combination of multiple, and now I'm showing you the three companies I work with, but actually there should be a full list of a lot of the expertise that we are working with, and that could actually grow and become information that can be used in Ukraine. The housing is, of course, one which is very strongly and very clearly related also to Ukraine, to rebuild the country and things like that. But drivers for modular bio-based systems is not just we need houses, because then we can say, well, why wood, why different, why not other materials? So I'm going to talk about what are really drivers for it, and also how are we working. So one of the things, of course, the limited resources. We cannot just keep on digging and using the resources that are used for decades, because it's just not there. Simple as that. And it's very bad for the environment, of course. So limiting resources is a key thing, especially if you look at how the building industry, the influence of the building industry, we use a huge amount of materials in the building industry. So we have also a huge responsibility there. But because we use so much, the impact that we can have is also very quickly large. So we should use that responsibility and really do something with it. Another thing, especially also in the Netherlands, but I think everywhere, the nitrogen, the CO2 footprint. It develops, it stops certain industries' development or well, has a huge influence on that one, definitely. And also there, the building industry, the amount of waste that is produced is enormous. And I once saw the sentence, which I think is very, very correct. Waste is just a bad design. I think I hope a lot of people know it and remember it when they start designing, because actually that is a key, simple sentence, but it says so much. Waste is a bad design. And if I'm looking at this, you can see here a lot of waste, but especially if you look in Ukraine, well, luckily the situation is like this very often, that there is so much material lying around. And we talk more about wood now, but please do understand that what I'm saying here is not only about wood. It's about using and reusing material and how to do that in a modular way. So I'll also have a few slides on that one. So this, what we see here on the ground, should not be seen as waste, but should be seen as a material that can be used again. Yeah, and also all those items, limited resources, nitrogen, CO2, all the things, it's very, very difficult to have an individual approach. But it's driven by an individual approach. Of course, we need people that are really focusing and willing and driving it. But we definitely also need governmental guidance, so that what we're doing is really landing on towards reality, because otherwise we are very interested people, but we at one point it has to be realized. Well, we're not doing very good in that sense. We're still behind schedule, of course. Well, not of course, that's just the reality. So there is a lot of work to do. Another driver that I want to mention is the people's interest. And of course, it's everywhere different. And again, completely different in Ukraine at the moment. But still is a relationship that it's not about having your material, it's about using it. And we see that, and luckily also the young people see it as well, that, well, borrowing it from each other and sharing it is a huge future. We see it in Green Wheels, Airbnb, Spotify, you name it. A lot of companies actually are running on it. And I think it's important. So using it, not just having your stuff, but actually helping each other and using, sharing this stuff. Also the flexibility in the way we live. You start as a young couple, you probably have, if you're lucky, a small house, and you start growing, your family is changing, then your kids having fun and growing up and leaving the house again, you end up the two of you again, and you think, what am I doing in such a big house? So the flexibility there is also a very important part in the way people live, but also should be reflected to the architecture and the way we build, in my opinion. How we build is something that we should, well, prevent. Well, of course, there's a huge turnover already, especially at certain countries. These things want to be, well, less and less be seen, but still it's there a lot. And this is something that, well, if we're looking at Ukraine, well, we think we should try to avoid these types of building situations. Not that I'm saying everything cannot be like this, but it will need different new developments, as also Alex is saying. We need new development. Also, the scale is too large just to do it like this. The way we build here is, well, the list on the right, we are depending on the weather conditions, so it will block us to a correct planning. There's a lot of many people on site. They all have to be combined, large risk, safety risks, and well, the building site is messy, a large building site. So there are a lot of things actually which are happening, which must be largely improved in that sense. And that's what I'm going to talk about as well. Also, after the building is used, we don't want to see this anymore. We don't want to see a linear economy. And of course, you think, well, we need to rebuild buildings as soon as possible to get people in there. And I fully understand, but hopefully also think about the step afterward. Hopefully think also about after what you build, the land, the country is going to change multiple times. It's not like we rebuild it and that's it. No, it's going to be develop. So I think also the flexibility and be aware of that development is extremely important. So just a linear economy, just saying we build something, if we don't use it anymore, we're going to create waste of it. That will have a huge influence on Ukraine, in my opinion, if that's the path to follow. Of course, the circular economy is the way forward, right? We are creating something much of a bio-based material. We use it, reuse it, and please let's have this loop as many times as possible. And at one point, okay, we bring it back to Earth so we can start the full cycle again. So that is really circular economy. And that is the basic, in my opinion, that all new projects should be related to. So green needs on large scale, and that's of course a big influence on the decision to make. Also, at one point fast, also sustainable. I'm going to talk about, so to me, this is what I'm going to talk about, is then the modular bio-based construction that we're building, and hopefully that will have good way of thinking also in Ukraine. So modular bio-based building, just spoke about the one here on the left side, the why, and this list is not complete. And hopefully in Ukraine, I'm not an expert there, so for me, I'm very open to all the reasons why we should do this and how to implement that the best way, of course. How, that's what I'm going to talk about, the prefabrication and this list on the right side. So I want to talk about that. There is a big difference between prefabrication and modular, and I will tell that also. So why do we, how prefabrication is going to help this is of course, on one side logical, but I want to give you insight on what prefabrication can do. So for us, it is the key word to our production, for our site, but also our planning. If you look at the production, some list I'm going to show now, but I hope that is important to understand. The prefabrication on production means we can improve the production, so it's a high quality. We don't have weather influence. We can use the best tool because we are working inside indoors. So the quality is good and the productivity is good. And we can reduce the use of materials as well, because if you look at this plank here, we can make things out of it. We still have some spare here, but this can be from another project, right? We can optimize exactly the use of material digitally, how everything is cut out of a plank, nesting we call that. Yeah? And also we can combine several projects within one base plank. Think about that in a big scale, then of course there's a huge reduction of material use. Also less waste, same reason, because we can combine different projects and within the factory. Also the failure is largely reduced. There's a huge amount of material on site that is just wasted. So there, prefabrication is also important. And the traffic. Don't want to have 10 companies at the same time on site, because that is just making the whole logistic part on site very, very difficult and also risky, and also influence each other extremely. So when one is late, all the others has to deal with it and to find new planning or things like that. So traffic, bringing things to the factory and then bring it once for multiple projects will reduce the amount of traffic a lot. And then having the complete material, which is just the material that's needed for the building, towards the site, again, reduce the amount of traffic. This is the company. We're building here the floor plates on the left. These are beams, I think these are columns. Where we have the facade elements on the left. What you see here is multiple projects, yeah? But the way building it, people are working on multiple projects at the same time. So much more efficient in the factory as well. Besides, the left picture looks very nice. Look at us working together, but I see it actually like, wait a minute. You should not start designing on site. That's too late. This is me here on the right side, sitting there with my coffee, enjoying all the work that we've done before, and seeing that everything runs fluently, right? I don't want to work on a design or a production way on site anymore. That should be done. It should be that material is brought there, and sometimes even directly from the truck onto the building, or have small amounts of elements there. But you see here on the left side, there is nothing on the ground. It's just directly from the truck going into the building, quick, and the truck is gone, right? So it's a very short time on site, and the site is very much smaller and cleaner. Don't have waste like this. And what is important, if you work on site, you always have to order more material on site than you actually need, because you cannot exactly order from a big company the amount of wood that you need. You have so much plates in a package. So that's all going to be on site. And not all of that is still there is going to go back to the factory. It will cost more money to bring it all back than just throw it away. So enormous amount of material, again, it's just wasted by that. And again, here you see the way the site looks. And of course, I'm taking a dramatic picture, of course, to make it clear. You can see the difference there. Also, when all the material is there, you have to protect it against robbery. Well, I've already showed some example there. But also wind, rain, it can be damaged. So that is a big cost. And also, it will delay your work on site. Which is also important is the neighbor. Well, we live in a very dense country here, so when we want to build something, well, we know Amsterdam is very crowded. The neighbor and all the noise and the way you build has a huge influence on the neighbor, and therefore the neighbors also has a huge influence on the way we have to build. So just bringing there base elements instead of cutting, drilling, and the whole kind of thing is, of course, a much better way of building it, and being there in a short period in a clean environment. It also improves the safety because, well, most of the work is done in a factory. We just have to connect it. So also less scaffolding and things like that. The reduce of failure. Things like this is not something that is thought of in the factory. This is something that different companies are working on site, not communicating, and just think, well, this is my work. I don't care what the result is. This is something we cannot allow, of course. This is rubbish. And prefabrication also shortens the way of building. And now I'm talking about prefabrication. Later I will include here the modular. Design phase is longer. You do everything in the beginning. You really think everything out in the beginning on desk, digitally. So the fabrication phase is then in the factory. And then we don't call it construction phase, but it's actually an assembly. We connect things on site, right? Okay, so the costs in that sense are more predictable. Also, the labor shortage is less because people on site, and automation in factory is simple, higher. So we use less people there. Then the difference going to modular elements. Looking at modular elements, these elements are prefabricated, but they are much more intelligent because they can go from one place to another place. And there's a strict design rule, actually, mostly on the connection, but there can be multiple more. And these elements have to be made so that they can be taken apart and be rebuilt somewhere. Well, that's, of course, the holy grail, of course, that we want to create. So it's a family of elements that always, what kind of design you make, can communicate with each other. In that sense, you can make a lot of different buildings. So these are all buildings that we all made. These are, well, small thing. These are holiday houses. And we thought, well, should we do this? And actually, this is our learning process. We built now about 12 of these houses, but they're all different. Creating a modular system is learning and improving until actually you have really a very, very strong system that can, with that system, you can build all different types of buildings. So these are all MDLX systems created based on one system, and they are very, very different. Right? We have small housing. We are now working on multiple story. This one is now starting up. So this is multiple story apartment complexes, and this one is more like offices. And the function can be very different. The size can be very different, but the system can be the same. But when you talk about modular elements, the system of a floor is not just one floor design. It's different floor designs, but all can be connected in the same system. Why do we need that? Because if we talk about multiple story housing, the rules and of creating a floor is completely different than when you just build an office. So in that sense, sound, insulation, vibration is a fire safety, call it, is very different when there's a house where people do need to sleep in than in an office where people are hopefully not asleep and have a completely different emergency plan. So that means when we build a modular system, we have different types of floor which still can be connected in the same family, right? You have to, when you're working with wood floors, more from the structural part, but the whole floor is really developed based also on the fire, on the vibration and sound. That is such a huge impact on really the correct design of the floor. That structure is just a small part of the design. And that's why those three companies I'm explaining, that is to integrate that. You have to integrate many disciplines. When you're working with modular, it makes the design much more complex because you have to create details that can be easily connected by everybody. So everybody in the crane should be able actually, and you have much more people now suddenly that can help building if you think through what kind of connections you're going to make. If that doesn't need a high educated person really in the building industry, then many more people actually can be involved in building up the country. And I think there is a huge impact on how structures can be created and what kind of people are needed to create it. And that is, to me, a huge challenge for the designers to be able to think about that. So that a lot of manpower actually and will can be addressed to create, well, the new building. Adaptability is a key thing of a modular system. So not just building one thing, it can be extended in a later phase, it can be reduced, it can actually be removed, but it can also be completely detached and a new building can be made out of it. That is an important part of the modularity. So you see here ABC, an example. Now we're working on a huge project in the south of the Netherlands where it's going to be built in stages. Also, we don't know how the company is developing. So they say, we build this, we build that, the white part first, the green parts after, then the purple one. Actually, for us, this doesn't have to be printed or anything. We can always say, well, no, sorry, it's just going to be this one. It's not going to be that one. We are pretty flexible in the way we build. And I think also there, what I just mentioned before, the stages of how Ukraine is going to be rebuilt, it's not one stage. It's going to be steps. And I think here, again, it's something to be aware of in the design, in the future development. So how to think about modularity is the use of parts. The building is there, well, it could be there for 5 years. It's now going to be 7, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be demolished and something completely different is going to be made. This whole area has to be brought back to nature, and there should be no sign of a building in the future at all. And so that's also the way it's been built, including the foundation. So this is going to be taken apart, rebuilt, and rebuilt, what elements are going to be reused. I'm saying elements because it's not that we are talking about a financial model based on buildings. We're now certainly talking about a financial model built based on elements, parts of buildings. So we talk to banks, and they're again same as with reinsurance. It's a difficult world suddenly because how to finance elements that can be replaced from one place to another place. Banks, they go nuts. They say, well, what's the value of it? What's the value now? What's the value in 5 years? That is a huge lesson for us to learn and to experience, actually. But I think, in my opinion, it's a huge opportunity to make the adaptability of building in the world, actually, a much higher level. And also bring it much more to the people instead of like a block that's always there, and it's really a block on your foot financially. It makes it much more usable and adaptable also for people. So design phase and Modular is much longer the first time, and what I showed before, steps of creating those holiday homes, they make it shorter and shorter. We started with the first one. We needed 3 weeks to build the main structure. Now we build in 1 day. We built the main structure in 1 day. So wind and airtight. We come there, very well planned, and everything is there in 1 day. Then the finish has to be there, but you understand the impact of such a design can have on the building assembly time. But it needs a huge amount of disciplines working together. That's why the LIX is funded by multiple different disciplines. I'm much more from the technical guy, but you have a factory, you have an architect, you have a lot of different people also from on site. So all people, they are communicating and working together to be able to get that level of modular system. Digitization makes this, well, the innovation, the new development of material, and especially also with wood, it's hugely automated. We, of course, are doing the same thing. We have now elements which have rules clearly. So if you have elements which you can, well, you know in advance how they are created, you can give it numbers. Simple as that. You can say numbers, the length, the width, whatever. You can give it numbers. With numbers, we can create programs. We can set a parametric geometrical design. So we have actually geometric designs which create then elements like this. And from this, by just changing those numbers, the whole building changes. But having done everything digitally, you can get directly all the materials, the cost, the planning, you name it, everything can come out of it. So very quickly, not just for us, more important, I think also important, also for the client, follow the whole process during the building. It's just what we say, it's a dashboard, follow the whole process because it's very much digital. From this numbered parametric designed element, you will get more and more. It's a basic actually for a BIM model where all the disciplines come together. And elements which are created here as, let's say, block element, then replaced by production elements, the production design, and that comes back into the BIM, and then you have the full BIM model in the production line there. And here, when we're building it, there's now suddenly a different look. We have the montage, so in the part, you can rebuild it, but the elements can also back into the new design, right? So we're not losing any value. A small example, so a list, well, this is a list, but these things are coming in then, right? So this is just very quickly, in 1 day, we have the whole thing in there. And to be honest, like things like this, these are exception elements. Every building has exceptional elements. We don't want to have all the buildings the same at all. And that's why I think it's very important to understand that working with elements is a bit different than working with complete units. elements have a much bigger freedom in design. Elements like this, we just add them to our basic design. If we think they're very interesting, we make a basic element, right? So our library is actually growing in time, depending on the interest on what is really needed. Then we have the BIM model. Well, we all know it forces us to think in elements, the interaction of discipline, and especially your virtual reality shows, well, we can get the whole building, right? And in that sense, on the production, we have the digital design and the production file link, which increases the speed of the production, also the accuracy. And there's a strong reduction in the production cost when the production is automated, because you have a 24/7 industry that's actually running. But the digitalization is very important also to create the elements precise and in a higher speed. And we can actually build the whole building before, so we learn and we make the mistakes then and not on site, which will have a much higher influence, of course. Then I want to add some research things, which are related, of course, and some of them are real, and some of them are really very in the early stage of research. But still, you cannot say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to use it, but we have to start somewhere, of course. So some examples is, again, the combination of wood, in this sense, with concrete. And I can give a whole lecture about this, but the reason for this is to have, if you just have wood, then it could be that for some buildings, you need more mass for sound or vibration. And there is an enormous development to be taken there, because you can just add mass, but then you actually use material just as mass, but not as a structural element. So here, this is the first step to really add mass, but also use that mass in a structural way, and for sound and the whole bunch. So combining a lot of different disciplines by producing that. Now it's concrete. What is the development? New materials, what can it be? But also here, the development of connecting these elements is important. So tomorrow we are going to do some new tests. So each of these have different ways of connecting, and we're going to test these things tomorrow, and how it works and how we can further develop these things. Another research, so I'm just going to show a few of the research projects that we're doing. Another research is, okay, you want to add mass, but where to add mass? We now just put it everywhere on the floor. Is it wise to do that? Where is it much more? What has the biggest influence? So placing the mass on top or in the floor, on dampers, that is the research being done now. And also where to place it. Is it in the center? Is it how much in the center? Could also be on the edge. And what you can see, if you look at these 4 pictures, it's actually, this one is the more the left one. So it's not much of material. But if you see, if you increase the amount of material, it definitely has influence on the acceleration. More important, you see, not so much when you are placing the material towards the end, right? So only putting in there 65% or 70%, so reducing the amount of material with 30%, it doesn't matter that much. It's more about in the middle, the floor, where the mass has huge influence. Bang, you have 35% of material reduction actually to use. Based on the structural part, I have to say, because this still is also, it's not just structure, it's also about vibration, or vibration is this one, but also about sound and fire. So multiple disciplines have to look at this. This is a completely different thing. This is with bio-based rope, and designing it and optimizing it with a computer, of course, and then producing it with a robot. So this is a work at the university, and be aware, this is, I deliberately show you some stuff that is not working, because it's testing and research to be done, why things do fail, or and how we have to improve it, right? But you see on the right, the status where we are now is an element that can take compression is woven with bio-based materials with resin. The resin is at this moment not fully bio-based, but it's getting there. That's development on material, development on design, and development on production, actually, that we're trying to pull here. This is a product, bio-based material. So a lot of a mixture of bio-based material to create a building material, which is absolutely not strong at this moment. But again, that's the development. It's again development of material research, and material production, and then also testing it to see where we are and how to improve it. So I would not build my own house with this material yet, but it's a development, of course, to bring the world much more towards sustainable materials. And then also building it, how to build it and how to automate it. Also, at the university, we are trying to have more knowledge about it and trying to create, and hopefully, oh no, that cannot be. Cannot skip it. That's a shame. I want to make steps in the movie. But the key thing is how to create these things and automate them as much as possible, and including now it's a little bit slow, but including then the placing them. I'm going to, because this takes a little bit too long. 1 second. Maybe like this. Do you see the screen still?
Yes.
Okay, now skip a little bit. Here you have the gluing. So now one machine is picking it up or filling it. This one is putting the glue on, and now it will speed up again. So he's putting everybody glue. He's placing it. The other one is doing the glue again. So it's much quicker placing them. And at one point there is the so it's a multifunctional robots working together. And now he's placing it, but holding it so that the other robot is actually taking the screw. He has to connect it correctly and then placing it into the correct location. So what is for us to learn is how we design elements that are capable of doing this, so that we can create quicker and automated elements, which is of course already done on a high scale. But the combination of design directly towards production in that case is very, very important. Right? Not just first design something, then think how to produce it, but combining these parts. Another research is how to reuse concrete, because we can say sustainable, but if you have elements there, and well, especially if you look at Ukraine, depending on the status of elements, how to reuse it. Reusing elements is, of course, the #1 list of being sustainable. So it doesn't matter what kind of material it is. So trying to get the elements into a stock, knowing what is there, and especially this one, what is the capacity? As a structural engineer, that is a big question. How to find these elements, and what do they? What kind of loadings were there already? Is there a lot of cracking in these elements? So, what is the status of those elements? Is in that sense very important, and how to combine from different buildings towards a new building, so the connections are there. But it is, to me, a very, very important development to collect elements that are used in a proper way, so that designers can use it in advance, and knowing what there is in advance already for their design, and actually saying, I want that in 5 years, right? In the Netherlands, they have also companies who are also knowing what's going to be demolished within the next 5 years, and already selling it towards the new clients. And that is, if you can do that properly without too many risks, then that's of course a win-win situation for everybody. And the last one I want to show to end my story is this one, which is 100%. This is made by a colleague of mine at university. He said everything has to be reused. So wood, the old doors, even the toilets, everything. And then the client said, yeah, but wait a minute, I'm not going to sit on a toilet, on a reused toilet. And then my colleagues asked, so when have you been to a hotel for the last time? Because that one is being used by the whole world, not, and you're just going to sit on it without thinking about it. This is exactly the same. Maybe you don't like the color, the style. Don't talk about reuse of toilets because everybody is using the toilet. And I think that is an important, simple lesson, actually. Share it, use it, reuse it. And this is what I want to show you as well, because I think this is very inspiring. It's just a lot of work, but we have huge opportunities. And the change is necessary. If you look at the rule, we cannot build in wood. Well, I don't think it can fall. Well, we are happy to help. And as I'm showing here on the left side, collaboration makes things possible in a way you didn't imagine actually in advance. And sometimes, very often, makes it much, much simpler than taking all the things here apart and rebuilding it. Just collaboration is the key thing in that sense. So that was actually my story. This is where you can reach me if you have any questions afterwards. But thank you
so
for
much.
having me. Yeah.
Yes, Arjan, thank you so much also for the final slide, which is quite funny, but well, it's working. We are we started a bit later, and we are now actually out of time. But do you feel like taking some questions, or
yeah, that's fine with me. Stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay. What do I want to start from? Because I have so many. Well, let's say this thing with modular prefab construction. It is often associated in Ukraine with private houses, small scale, very quick, very agile, but something that is not suitable for public buildings, for bigger buildings, for social infrastructure like schools and hospitals, etc. How can we destroy this myth? Yeah, do you have any examples of this kind of projects, like in general? Don't need to show them right now.
Well, this myth is the same as what just we discussed also about the fire. That's the same thing. It's really about the design. Wood can act much better in fire when you design correctly, right? Actually, wood can be the protector of the structure and have a much safer environment. That's the same thing with all the other disciplines. If you design it correctly, then the floors and all the elements are in the same or even higher level than when you're building it with concrete. So it's not about the material, it's really about your design. And knowing when there's a different function, that your design have to be different. And that's not different with concrete or with steel. It's the same with wood. So and what is of course very, very helping, and that's also the reason why wood is now suddenly so popular, is that wood is not just directly from the tree, it is combined into CLT or LVL. So we have now much more design opportunity because the scale is much higher, bigger plates, and much higher quality because we can take out the weak spots from the tree into the production. So we have now material that we can really rely on and can also create bigger elements. So mass wood designs are in that sense a huge influence on now the development actually, and also development to take these fears away, and that's why all the testing on fire, on sound, and all that kind of thing, because we also still have to do it. The municipality wants to see the fire test and say, well, we can do it again, but there are so many tests already. But we do it again just to give them the trust. Yeah.
So piloting, testing, and things like that is the way. Also about the prefab panels, you know, there is this perception in Ukraine, which is, of course, going for a long time from the Soviet times, of this prefab panel buildings which were constructed during the Khrushchev period of 60s and 70s. Out of concrete, and they were, yeah, it was the approach to build quickly and a lot of housing without really focusing on quality and yeah, human-centered design. So those buildings are terrible, they are cold, etc. So when now you would speak about panel construction in Ukraine, everybody would refer to Khrushchevka buildings. How do you think it's possible to change this kind of perception? And on top of that, what is happening with the well, sound? You mentioned sound, but also energy efficiency of this modular panels.
Yeah. Well, what you mentioned is very quickly build something to have, well, space for people to live. And that is one of the things that I said, well, I hope I can understand that at some places that is needed, but to really rebuild your country, you need sustainable things. And simple as that, everything that we build has the rule to be, so that means wind. Oh, was the connection bad for a second?
Yeah, it was a bad connection. Let's see if it's becoming better, or maybe we could eliminate camera for better sound at least.
Oh, shall I take my camera off then for a moment?
Oh, let's try if it, yeah.
Okay, let me know if something goes wrong. Yeah. What I'm saying is that, well, there are just the regulations on the building. So, meaning it doesn't matter with how you build, the regulations should be there. And that's a strict rule. So when we build in concrete, steel, or wood, it has to take the insulation value, the fire resistance, the sound, the whole, everything is the same for whatever way you build. So it's not saying, oh, wait, now you're working with panels, you have less rules. No, we create very high insulation panels, thick if they're needed. Yeah, so that's no difference. So that's it's about the rules that are set up with the government. This is the way we want to rebuild our country. I think that is where it started. It's not about a technical impossibility or something at all. Absolutely not.
Indeed, yeah, you're right. And then for my final question, because I was really inspired by the picture from your MDLX factory with all those huge slabs that you prefab there. So it was probably a question that was inspired also by the statement of Alex, who said that if you don't have CLT factories in Ukraine, you should go for them right now. We actually have only one right now, and we need much more, many more than that. So my similar question is, maybe we should also have something like MDLX factory in Ukraine. What would be the investment to create such a production?
Well, well, yeah, the investment is well, you need all the machines, of course, and the spaces. But in my opinion, the investment is not an issue if you look at the what is needed and for the country. So yes, there is an investment, but to me, it's neglectable towards the advantage that is there for the future.
So how do we motivate companies like yours to come in and to establish here?
Well, first the rules have to be changed, otherwise we're building it for nothing. No, I think things like this, just to explain, I'm really, I think it's important that we can talk about how we do it, and the best thing is to start communicating what is necessary, and start with small scale test buildings, and then look at it from all disciplines, not just producing it, because I would hate it if we would just build everywhere the same building. That's absolutely not what modular building is about. We want to see how the people there live, and we want to see how, it's not about copying the stuff that we're doing here into your country. It's about the philosophy, and then working in a local environment, the people, how to use it, trying to then use that philosophy into your country. So that would be the first step, to really bring different disciplines and especially experts and people who want to develop your country to talk to, and that we can show opportunities, and together we can talk about how those opportunities to use them to fill in your the wishes actually from Ukraine itself. So that will be the first step. And investing in the CLT company, I don't think it's a bad investment at all, because I don't think it can be stopped to use CLT or production industry to help build the company.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Arjan, for joining and for your time and your talk today. Much appreciated. I want just to end this webinar by showing one. Basically, it's a QR code on the slide, and it's basically to our Ukrainian audience, because I want to ask people to scan it and to fill in this form, this very short form, if you're interested to test our system, which is in the development. It's an online platform for secondary construction materials management. So basically connecting vendors with the users in a local context, and we want to beta test it with some of you, especially if you are an architect or constructor or engineer or maybe demolition company or something like that. If you want to talk to us and try, we would appreciate that a lot. And on this note, I want to thank everybody for joining and to wish everyone a pleasant, safe, sunny day. Let's rebuild Ukraine in a green and circular manner. Thanks everyone, and goodbye.